to money. Well, 1018 right now, and one Howard University alum says after graduating from college with piles of debt, he spent the majority of his time focusing on the realities faced by his financial burdens. He explains all that and more in a new book where he uncovers topics that are both relatable and really adding a sense of humor to it all, because we need to laugh at this all at the same time. Joining us right now is author of I Don't Want to Die Poor is Michael Arceneaux. So good morning to you, Michael. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm good for a plague. Thank you for having me.
That's right. That's a good way of putting things, right? Hey, let's talk about this right now because it's your second book. Why did you decide to discuss student debt and money hand in hand in this book?
If you know me personally, you know there's never been a moment where I haven't talked about my private student loan debt, because when you pay over $1,000 a month in student loans, it impacts every facet of your life, so it can't help but impact you. But for me, I've been frustrated with, I think, the narratives about student loan debt, particularly from my generation. I kind of find a lot of the arguments, or at least narratives, been superficial. So I really want to talk about debt and all its facets, how it really impacts a lot of our lives, kind of the myths of social mobility, because a lot of people go into college thinking that's their way to get ahead, particularly if you're Black. So I want to explore all these things and just kind of also be honest about the emotional debt that we carry, because I think that's just as important as the financial debt.
Well, seriously.
And not be depressing about it. So thank you for saying it was funny.
No, I get that, because, you know, you go to college, right? You have these dreams, these aspirations. You're going to graduate. You're going to have this amazing salary, you know, in your head. And then you realize, well, your salary is quickly going to pay down the student debt. And if you don't pay it down, it has these crazy interest numbers. And then you start getting the calls, right? Because also in college, they sell you on all these credit cards that also have high interest rates as well, right? And you're a college student, you're like, I want a credit card. I want to spend all my money. So how did you feel, I guess, dealing with receiving calls from debt collectors and having to then realize, all right, I got to sacrifice something?
Well, you know what's interesting is that I wanted to, like, I take ownership of the choices that I made, but I also kind of add to the fact what I think a lot of college graduates or college students are realizing now is that this is the second great financial crisis of my adulthood. I just turned 36 in April. And so I, knew that broadcast journalism doesn't pay a lot of money off the bat, but I couldn't have imagined that the industry as I understood it would have imploded, compounded by the fact that then there was the Great Recession. So some of these things are fortunately out of your control, and then you do have to make choices. And in my case, I never wanted to default on my private loans because I knew that would impact my mother. And I write about a lot of my guilt in that. And I think, I'm very passionate about all of my goals and ambitions and wanting to do right by my family and people I want to represent in my work. But you also have to make a living, and you also have to pay off the debt. And I just really had to suck up a lot of things and go with a lot of joy in certain instances, just to take care of the bills. And I write about how even in the book, when I made the New York Times bestseller list for my first book, I Can't Date Jesus, it was the same week that I lost my health insurance because it was more important to pay the loan, pay my rent and the loans, all these things.
By the way, first off, congratulations on the degree of broadcast journalism. Welcome to the family of broadcast journalism, right? But I want to talk about this too, because I don't think, at least I didn't realize when I'm in my teens, going into my young 20s, that these choices you're making in college in terms of debt and credit cards can really impact you for the rest of your life in terms of your credit score.
Right. One thing I will say I didn't realize also was that, I thought, people will work with you if you don't have the money. But the way the private student loan industry is set up, if I file for bankruptcy now, or if I died, actually, my mom would still be on the hook for my remaining debt, because that's the structure of that industry right now. So I didn't know all those things. I thought, I was maybe naive and thinking maybe corporations will be nicer to me. But it's like, no, you basically took out a pawn shop loan to fund your education. So humbling, humiliating, but you have to live with the choices that you make, and hopefully I'm helping educate people about what the choices they make moving forward.
You know what I like about you? That you're willing to be able to be so open about this, because some people are like, oh my gosh, I can't talk about my debt. That's an embarrassing facet of my life that I don't want anyone to know about, so I'm going to tuck it away in this back part of my brain, pretend it's not there, and then it all adds up and it builds up into other parts of your life. So you bring humor to this. So real quick before we go, tell me a little about why you decided to bring the humor to the book as well.
I grew up with a lot of difficulties just from childhood. And I think one thing that's always kept me alive, and even within my family, we're all funny. I think humor really keeps me alive, keeps me going, keeps me focused. And I also think, people, we have to, not always, but sometimes to laugh at our pain is really not a coping mechanism. It's a coping mechanism. It's not because I think sometimes people can use humor to deflect, but I think it's just in this instance,
Yeah.
learning to not be so sad. And for me, humor really helped with it. And thank you for that, because it was very embarrassing to write the book. I do not like talking about money.
Well, no, it's an embarrassing thing for so many people too. But you know what? You're not all, everybody's going through it, and so I think that's why
Right.
it's so important for people to read it. Real quick, we only have a few seconds left. Do you recommend paying the minimum payment? What do you recommend?
Pay what you can, and if you don't have it, my advice is to just kind of take the L right now and not let it beat you down, because we are
Yeah.
taught to think that our debt is our problem, and it's not that way. And there's only so much you can do at a time like this. So
Right.
thank you again.
Michael Arceneaux, what an honor to talk to you. Come back anytime, okay?
Love to come back. Really
Yeah.
great to talk to you.
Good advice there. Thank you so much. 10:24 right now, everybody. And I think that was such a good conversation to have, because
Yeah.
I graduated with thousands of dollars. And you look at when you graduate and you get that number,
Yep.
you're like, how am I ever going to do this?
Right, and I know a lot of older millennials like you and myself, we're more reactionary. Hopefully this book and the resources that he's providing will allow students going into college to be more proactive
Yeah.
in knowing what they're getting into. Like you, I know everything was about filling out the FAFSA, right? Going
Yeah.
and just filling it out, but no one really broke down what the repercussions are afterwards.